All right, let's talk about a journey that pretty much every single development team goes on, taking a Google Kubernetes engine cluster from a simple, maybe messy prototype and turning it into a real production-ready fortress. You really have to think about it like there are two totally different worlds. In one world, you've got the dev cluster. It's all about moving fast, being forgiving, getting things set up quickly so you can prototype. But then, there's the production cluster. And that world is all about reliability, resilience, being absolutely secure and ready to scale. These are not the same place, and bridging that huge gap between them is what this is all about. So that's the million-dollar question, right? How do you actually cross that chasm? How do you build that bridge from a simple idea to a system that's rock solid and ready for real users? Well, that's exactly the journey we're about to go on.
Our journey has to start with the foundation. And look, just like building a skyscraper, the decisions you make right here at the very beginning, they're absolutely the most critical. Getting this stuff right now saves you from massive headaches down the road.
The very first thing you have to get a handle on is cluster versioning. Seriously. If you don't, you fall into this nasty trap called version drift. This is where your clusters just get older and older, falling further and further behind on updates. And while that's happening, they're quietly collecting security holes, setting you up for one giant, painful upgrade that breaks everything all at once. So how do you fix this? Well, the good news is GKE makes building a solid versioning strategy pretty straightforward. First, you pick a release channel. That just tells Google how fast you want updates. Then you tell GKE to automate the upgrades. Let it do the heavy lifting. And finally, you set up maintenance windows so these upgrades only happen when it's convenient for you. This turns what could be total chaos into a predictable, managed process. All right, next up on our foundation checklist is how you organize your workloads. You can't just throw all of your applications onto one giant pile of servers. That's a recipe for disaster. You need structure. And in GKE, that structure is called node pools. The magic word here is specialization. Instead of one big, expensive generic pool, you create multiple specialized ones. Maybe you have a pool with high memory machines just for your databases, or another one with powerful GPUs for machine learning. This lets you isolate your critical apps and it saves you money. You can even use a cool feature called taints and tolerations to lay down the law and tell Kubernetes, hey, only these specific kinds of pods can run on this specific hardware. Okay, so our foundation is poured and set. Now it's time to build the walls. Welcome to Section 2, Fortifying Your Cluster. If versioning and node pools are the bedrock, then what we're about to cover, these are the high, strong walls of your fortress. Your first move, and honestly, probably your most powerful one, is making your cluster private. So what does that mean? It means your nodes, your actual servers, they don't get public IP addresses. They are basically invisible from the public internet. It's a really simple idea with a massive impact. An attacker can't attack what they can't even see. Right, so your cluster is now invisible from the outside. But what about when your apps inside need to talk to something on the outside, like a database or a storage bucket? The old school way involves static password keys, which, let's be honest, are a huge security nightmare waiting to happen. The modern way, the right way, is workload identity. It's this brilliant passwordless system that gives your pods temporary secure credentials automatically. The risk of leaked keys, it just goes away. And this is a classic example of what we call defense in depth. So your cluster is private and your workloads have secure identities, but you still need one more layer of protection inside the walls. Think of network policies as little firewalls between your pods. By default in Kubernetes, any pod can talk to any other pod. Network policies flip that script completely. They block all traffic unless you specifically say it's okay. This least privileged thinking is so important for containing a breach if one ever happens. So let's just quickly run through that security baseline. Private clusters to hide your nodes from the world. Workload identity to get rid of those risky passwords. Network policies to build firewalls inside your cluster. And finally, pod security, which stops containers from going rogue with dangerous root-level permissions. You see how they all stack up? It's all about layers. Okay, Section 3. We've built this amazing, secure fortress. But a fortress is pretty useless if nobody's on the watchtower, right? We've built the static defenses. Now we have to make it a living, breathing system that we can actually operate and understand. I love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. You could have the most secure cluster on the planet, but if it goes down and you have no clue why, it's not ready for production, period. This really breaks down into two sides of the same coin, resilience. On one side, you've got observability. That's your logging, monitoring, and tracing. This is all about knowing what's happening right now, so you can stop problems before they start. On the other side is disaster recovery. That's your game plan for when things, inevitably, do go wrong. And look, getting started with a DR plan doesn't have to be this massive, scary thing. A basic, viable plan really just has 3 parts. 1, back up your cluster configurations, all those YAML files. 2, back up your actual application data, the stuff in your databases. And 3, and this is the one everybody forgets, you have to regularly test your recovery procedures. A backup you've never tested isn't a plan, it's just a wish. Okay, we've made it to our final section, the production-ready mindset. We've talked a lot about the nitty-gritty, tactical stuff. Now it's time to zoom out and talk about the mental model that pulls all of this together. So we've covered the what to do and the how to do it, but the most powerful question you can ever ask is, why? What's the big idea, the underlying framework that should be guiding every single one of these decisions?
Believe it or not, it all boils down to one simple, powerful number: 5.
And that number represents the 5 pillars of GKE production readiness. You've got reliability, security, performance, cost, and operability. Every single decision you make about your cluster, from choosing a machine type to writing a security policy, is a balancing act, a trade-off between these 5 things. Let's just break these down into simple questions, right? Reliability, does it actually stay up and running? Security, is it safe from threats? Performance, is it fast enough for our users? Cost, can we actually afford to run this thing? And the one that often gets ignored, operability. Is this thing so complex that my team is going to tear their hair out trying to manage it day to day? This framework is the compass for all your decisions. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. After going through this whole journey, I want you to look at your own cluster and ask this. Was this thing just built? Or was it truly architected for resilience, using these 5 pillars as its guide? Because honestly, the difference between those two, that's everything.